wants to Skype in. So Ian wants to Skype in, so when we get a minute, let's let him know.
Okay, Dan, you ready? And we're live. Okay, so I'm live here with Dan McKnight from BringOurTroopsHome.us. He's one of our community activists and community leaders here in the Treasure Valley. And so what do you do in your spare time when you're not trying to bring our troops home, Dan?
I do own a small business. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I spend a lot of time building my business and working in that. And then I also dedicate about 40 hours a week to giving back to the community as a high school football coach in Meridian, Idaho. But my passion definitely lies in activism and finding a way to end the forever wars in the Middle East.
Woo-hoo! Got my vote.
So you and I have had a couple conversations. I've been to some of your events for Bring Our Troops Home, and I've been a little bit critical of your approach because I don't think you're actually raw enough about a lot of the things that behind why you want to bring the troops home. I mean, you've talked about policy and procedure and about appealing to individuals. Why'd you choose that particular approach?
My grandma used to always tell me that you attract more flies with honey, right? And we live in a political environment now where we're very tribal and everybody hates everybody, and we are name callers, we're bomb throwers, and the left runs the left, the right runs the right, and I didn't think there was a way to really find a way to solve that issue by maintaining the status quo. And so we decided to be very politically neutral, to appeal to people from all across the spectrum, and I think you've seen that in our organization. We've got you with the Green Party, we've got Republicans that have joined us, we've got conservatives, and we've got progressives, and we've got Democrats. We've got the Friends Coalition, the Quakers, who are on board with us. No two people in our organization have the same thoughts and beliefs on any other topic. Not healthcare, not border security, not immigration, not taxes, not corporate welfare. None of the other issues do they agree on except for this one issue. It's time to end American imperialism and to fight the empire.
So you and I,
We're clapping over here.
you and I have both been downrange since the war started. 2001, 18 years now. I've done 3 tours in Afghanistan, another tour in Iraq. What's your experience?
Sure, mine's not quite as elaborate as yours. I went to Afghanistan. I was actually out of the military. My term had ended right before the attacks on September 11th. And me and a buddy of mine that had gotten out together went right back down and signed up again. And we knew that our time was going to come to go be proud patriots and to fight for our country for something we thought was right and just. So in 2005, we deployed to Afghanistan very early in the war. We were in northeastern Afghanistan, right on the Pakistan border, deep in the Pesh River Valley, right up next to the Korangal Valley, the Valley of Death. And we were there for 12 months. And when we first got there, we deployed as a National Guard unit, augmenting the 10th Mountain Division, which is an active duty Army unit. And we were treated as second-class soldiers because we were National Guard. We couldn't get supplies, we couldn't get body armor, we couldn't get uniforms or boots or anything that wore out or needed replacing because nobody loved us. We didn't belong to anybody. And being the bold, never take no for an answer type of guy, I grabbed a satellite phone and climbed to the top of a mountain in the Pesh River Valley, and I called our governor of the state of Idaho. Called him directly. A friend of mine gave me his number, and I called him directly and I said, Governor Risch, who was the interim governor. He'd been governor for about a month. I said, you are the commander-in-chief of the Idaho National Guard. You've got citizen soldiers from your state that are fighting in a foreign war, and we need your help. We can't get supplies. And he said, Dan, I don't know what I can do. I've been the governor for a minute. I wasn't elected to this position. I was appointed because the previous governor went to Washington. He goes, but I'm going to do what I can. I hung up the phone, and 48 hours later, I get a very, very angry call from my battalion commander because I'd skipped the chain of command, telling me that Governor Risch had come through and our supplies were on the way. So they took away my satellite phone and told me to continue the mission. So I always thought Jim Risch was a patriot, supported troops, loved our military. I kind of held him up on a pedestal. And I held that position for a long time. And then in January of this year, he became the chairman as a senator now back in Washington. He's now the chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. Second most powerful man in foreign policy in the United States after the President of the United States, and probably right on par with Secretary of State. I mean, those three are the people that drive foreign policy.
Absolutely.
And so I thought, I'm going to try again. I leaned on Jim Risch once, I'm going to lean on him again, and I'm going to ask him to help and find a way to bring our troops home from this endless war. I was tired of seeing my friends coming home, deployment after deployment after deployment, some not coming home, some coming home with scars and mental pain and PTSD and traumatic brain injuries and divorce and bankruptcy and failed relationships, and I was tired of it. And I changed my tone on the war. I discovered the follies of being there through personal research. And so I wrote a guest opinion, which is really the only outlet a normal guy with no political ties has, asking Jim Risch to vote to end the wars. And 9 newspapers around the state of Idaho picked it up and ran it.
They did.
And I thought, wow, maybe there is a need for this. Maybe there is a call. And so I went to a Chamber of Commerce event in February where Jim Risch was speaking, and I stood up and I asked him a question. I said, Senator Risch, my name is Dan McKnight from Meridian, Idaho, and he stopped me right there. He goes, Dan, I read your guest opinion. I read your guest opinion. I remember you. And it kind of stood up a little straighter, right? Puffed my chest out a little bit. Thought I was in the right place. And I asked him the question, what's it going to take? What is it going to take for you to support ending the wars in Yemen, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and any of the other 80 nations around the world where we're fighting the global war on terror without an authorization?
Yeah.
And he looked me right in the eyes and he said, Dan, I'm with you. I do not support nation building. We will not be the world's policeman. I am done. I thought my job was done, Joe. I did my job as a soldier. I did my job as a citizen. I asked my elected leader and he agreed. I thought my job was done. And 3 times in the next 90 days, he went back to Washington and voted to extend America's presence in the Middle East, to keep us in the wars, and to maintain the status quo. And so I knew at that point it was time to do more. And that's when I started to bring our troops home.
So, now I'm going to move into therapy here, Dan. This is a nice, cozy little setting that we got here. And one of the things that Dan mentioned is our troops come home with scars, a lot of scars. And a lot of them have stories behind that. Stories they won't tell, stories they can't tell. But they're still stories they've taken responsibility for. Stories they should be telling. Because it's people like you out there who haven't been downrange, that have gotten nothing but the sanitized versions of what happens. The things that, our soldiers, our citizen soldiers, experience downrange in a different culture, in a war-torn area, where we often find ourselves supporting the wrong people. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here to give Dan a little bit of permission. So my story behind my activism started back in 2008. I had already been to Afghanistan twice, both times with 10th Mountain actually. So
We're brothers in that aspect, I guess. We didn't make that connection before. Shame on us.
Right, but so 2008, I was in Iraq. Now, there's this beautiful region in Iraq up along the Syrian border. It's called Sinjar Mountain. And there's a culture there. It's an ethnoculture, the Yazidis. And that particular mountain is a holy mountain to them. And while I was there, I actually went up to the top. And it's one of those amazing plains because Sinjar Mountain itself is clear up. It stands about 3,500, 4,000 feet up above the plains of Iraq and Syria. You can look out, you are high enough above the plains so you can see the curvature of the earth. And I can understand why the Yazidis believed that God came down and placed his feet on earth for the first time there on Sinjar.
Joe, this quit.
That's good. So, as a military intelligence analyst, one of the things that we were doing during that particular time was chasing oil smugglers. We were up in Sinjar, we were chasing oil smugglers that were smuggling oil from Iraq into Syria to fill a pipeline, and they were making a lot of money. One particular oil smuggler that we were chasing was a former police chief, former military officer. And when we disbanded the army there, he moved from military officer to criminal warlord. We were busy chasing the whole process down, and one of the things we like to do as an intelligence analyst is provide alternative means of intelligence, ways to explain away how we found out the things we did. And this particular warlord had had a brother, and this brother had 2 kids. This is a particular interest is because I identified with this particular brother because I had 5 children of my own. Recently divorced, thank you, United States Army. And so I had 2 daughters at the same time. One was 8 and one had just turned 2. Anyway, so we managed to conduct our subterfuge appropriately, and from that point we moved on, and we conducted a raid on his operation. One of the results that came out of that raid was we missed him, but we had convinced him that his brother had ratted him out. The end result of that, which I found out from the stories a few weeks later when the special operators had gone in to clean up their mess later, was this particular warlord had abducted his 8-year-old niece. Spend the next couple days raping and torturing her before he killed her, and then strung her naked corpse up in the center of town. Thing is that wasn't the end of his vengeance, because he had stuffed her full of dynamite, explosives, turned her into an IED. And when her father and her brother came to recover her body, he detonated it, killing her brother and her father, leaving her mother a widow, and now without 2 of her children. This is one of those things that sort of becomes a personal responsibility issue because I was part of the team that recommended approaching this individual's brother to create this perception that his brother was the one that was allied with the U.S. in giving him the information. That's not the only story I got from the front. It's probably the one that has affected me most over the years. And it keeps bringing me back to, why are we there? You know, if we can go over the statistics, kids who go over, the kids who come back, 22 a day. But for me, there is a personal story. There is a loss of a life cut short for effectively no reason.
Joe, thanks for sharing that. I hadn't heard that story from you before, and I understand why. You and I, we veterans, those that have been there, don't like to share those things. And giving this forum as a place to tell that story and explain the atrocities that we see is very powerful, and I want to thank you for that. I know it's not easy. I'm humbled by you because there's stories that I don't tell, and I'm sure you don't tell that story often. I'd imagine probably fewer than 5 times.
I think this is number 3.
Number 3. And we hold those stories very close to our hearts because we hold ourselves to a higher standard. We hold ourselves to a level of decency and honor that type of story doesn't jive with. But when we're in the sandbox, when we're over there fighting these wars, we are lied to. We are lied to about what our purpose is there, that we're fighting for this greater good, when in reality we're fighting someone's personal vengeance. The intelligence that we gather often comes from people that are asking us to do nothing more than to fight their enemies. And those are the entangled alliances that we're always trying to avoid. So the rawness of your story, it's powerful, and it needs to be told. And veterans should be encouraged to tell their stories on their time when they're ready to do so. And I'm glad that you were ready to do so. We have another young man that we work with, Ben. Yeah, I think you saw his story yesterday on the Waikin page.
Yeah, Ben actually works with Young Americans for Liberty, which is a student group here at Boise State University. And he recently got one of his letters to the editor published. And one of his critiques was, again, the entangled alliances, because during his time over there, sometimes we're asked to provide personal security details for key individuals who are powerful. And in the process of providing those security details, we find out things that we honestly find reprehensible. And Afghanistan was one of those that was particularly bad for me on that front, and I understand exactly where Ben was coming from. I remember my second trip, it would have been 2004, 2005. And we actually had one of our decent liaisons that worked with us. He ended up getting shot in the crossfire between two warlords who were fighting over the love of an 8-year-old boy. You know, and these warlords were people we were supporting.
Protecting both of them, different interests. Army defending one, CIA defending the other.
Yeah, and it's really sort of ridiculous the amount of involvement, the people that we endorse because they're powerful and influential, but they're also without moral character, they're without ethical character, and they don't understand the basics of human decency and human rights over there in a lot of cases.
Correct. And I've got just a short story to tell about that. Our biggest base that we were stationed at up in the valley was owned. The land was owned by one of these warlords, who was a known pedophile. He was a known abuser of young boys, and because that was part of their culture, it was on Thursday. It was just called. That was what they did on Thursday. The boys would paint their fingernails red, and they would follow these warlords around and perform sexual favors for them because that's what was expected in order for them to live peacefully. And we defended these people, and we would defend their interests. We would fight for their interests. And for me personally, it's time to stop propping up the pedophile culture that's going on over there with these warlords through American intervention. Stop guarding the poppy fields in Afghanistan that these warlords own. Stop fighting a shadow war for a purpose that doesn't actually exist there, and quit creating these powerful warlords that can come and do all the sinful and evil things that they want to do under our protection. And your stories and Ben's stories all kind of just prop up that belief in me and anybody that's in America that we're acting in your name when we're over there. We're acting on your behalf. Your elected leaders put us there. It's time for the public to stand up and say enough is enough. And the only way that these wars are going to happen is when we literally storm Washington and demand change, demand action, and let our stories be heard.
Yeah. So, what was one of yours? I know you got a story to tell, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one from downrange, because I know you do an awful lot of work with kids as a coach, you know, kids who enlisted and went over and served. Since you served, I mean, it's been 12 years since you were there, and you've been a coach how long now?
20 years. I've got kids that are playing on our football team that are enlisted or going to the Air Force Academy. We're going to fight the same war that I did, and who weren't even born when the war started. And that's disgusting. But a story that comes to mind. I don't share my stories often, but I feel that there's a need for it. there was we were in a place called Asadabad up in the Pesh River Valley, and it was me and a team of 12 Wisconsin National Guardsmen that worked for me. Me from Idaho, 12 Wisconsin National Guardsmen, and myself, and we were kind of on an island by ourselves up there. And I found a local boy who was a deaf mute. He had his ears, they stabbed a screwdriver in his ears, the Taliban warlord had, and they had ripped out his tongue because he had become friendly with the American forces. And he still would come around. He wore Abercrombie and Levi's, whatever the soldiers would give him. He was very westernized. Is that a word, westernized?
Americanized, westernized, yes.
And he had a brother, and these two became my errand boys. We were very careful. We would send them on missions to acquire chicken, or to get us a cold beverage, or to go pick peaches from the local orchards. We'd give them just these little tasks and then pay them very well because their family had literally nothing. And after this particular mission where we had been out for 45 days on the offensive trying to chase down these warlords and the insurgents, I hired this boy and his brother, these Wisconsin National Guardsmen. I asked them, they did a wonderful job fighting this, serving during this 45-day period. They'd gone without sleep, they hadn't showered, they hadn't eaten a hot meal. I asked them, what do you guys want? If there's anything I could provide for you after this mission, what would it be? And to a man, they all said, brats and beer, right? German Catholics from Wisconsin, brats and beer. And so
Of course.
we're in a Muslim country, so brats, not gonna happen.
Right.
Beer, not gonna happen, right? So I said, well, let me see what I can do. And so I hired the young boy and his deaf mute brother, and I gave him the instructions. I need brats. I had to explain what a brat was, and he looked at me like I was speaking Greek to him. I mean, sausage, right? A pork product. And I said, I want beer. And he said, okay, and he held out his hand, and that's the universal sign. He'd say bakshish, which means gift, give to me. And I started putting money in his hand, right? 20, 40, 100, 200, 300, 400.
A little more.
500, and he goes, that's good. And then they took off. And about 10 days went by and I hadn't seen them. And I was afraid that I had caused the demise of these two young boys, or I'd send them to college. I'm not sure which one it was.
Right.
And he comes back with a gunny sack right before the sun went down on the 11th day. And I open up the gunny sack, and there's a chicken in the gunny sack. It has no feathers on it, but it's alive, and it's skinny. It looked like it had been abused. And a 12-pack of Heineken. And I thought, wow, that's pretty dang close. And so I pulled the chicken out, and I go, what am I supposed to do with this? And he's like this. He's like, you eat. And I was like, no, you take that home. You guys go eat that. I'm not touching that thing. And we went back and had Heineken with the Wisconsin guys. Well, the kid came back the next day, and he'd been beaten up pretty good. He had 2 black eyes, and his nose was looked like it had been disjointed or broken, and his shirt was torn, and his pants were torn, and his boots were missing. And I asked him what had happened. He said he brought the chicken home, and they asked him where he'd gotten the chicken, and he explained that he had been paid to get chicken and beer for the Americans, and his parents had beat him mercilessly, within an inch of his life. I mean, he was bloody and cut up in the scat, and I carry that guilt with me. That's minor. I mean, that's one of the stories I do share occasionally, but it's minor. I mean, the kid didn't die. He's probably a little worse for the wear, but he's not. He's still with us. He's still alive. But the guilt that I had just because we wanted our American treats, and I asked him to do it, and I paid him handsomely for it, and then he suffered for it. It just shows you we have no business being there. We don't belong in their culture. They don't want us in their culture. The gift of democracy is such a cliche and arrogant comment to make. We're giving them the gift of democracy. We're not a democracy. Why would we give something that we don't believe in? And they haven't asked for it. They've asked for nothing more than to be left alone and let them live their tribal and agricultural society. That's what they want. And the people of Afghanistan didn't attack us. You know that.
No, they didn't.
The central government of Afghanistan didn't attack us.
No.
Right? Saudi Arabian citizens attacked us.
Actually, I think they were Pakistanis with Saudi passports, but
Same.
yeah,
Right. Either way, both Saudi and Pakistan are allies of America, so we couldn't go attack them. So what do? We take all of our toys in the sandbox and we bomb a third world country back into the Stone Ages by proxy. And so my guilt comes from that. My guilt comes from supporting a mission. I went there 10 feet tall and bulletproof. If you're going to take me away from my family to go fight a war, if you're going to take me away from my business, which was booming and thriving at the time, I'm going to go there and I'm going to win this war. I'm going to find Osama bin Laden. I'm going to destroy him. I'm going to do it. And I did. I fought with every ounce of my being. I volunteered for missions. I put myself in places that I had no business being, going out on convoys and flying missions and participating 18, 20, 22 hours a day because I didn't want to have to come back. I didn't want my son, who was he was 10 at the time, I didn't want him to have to come back. I didn't want another generation of Americans. I wanted to win the war because that's what was expected of us.
Yeah.
And then I come back, now I'm here and I've been home, so I got back in 2007. I've been back 11, 12 years now and the war is still going on. In fact, we've lost ground, we've created more enemies, we've created more insurgents. Every time we kill one insurgent, which is a name that I don't like to use, it's a made up phrase.
It is.
Whenever we kill one citizen of Afghanistan, 10 more join the fight against us. We're doing more harm there than good. And the war hawks in Washington need to understand it's time. It's time to get out of there. We are not doing what American values. We're not doing anything that honors American veterans. We're not doing anything that honors American citizens in their name. We are scarring an entire generation. An entire generation of Americans are scarred with PTSD, with traumatic brain injuries, with multiple divorces, bankruptcy, and having to live with the guilt that comes from the atrocities that are committed in the name of democracy.
Oh.
So, now Dan, you do have a tendency to focus on what happens here, which is natural. I mean, this is our tribe, this is the United States, these are our fellow citizens, these are the people we live with. These are our children, these are our children's friends, these are the kids who come over and play video games in your living room. You know, and we do have that focus and an understanding, but there is a much more holistic approach to the whole process, you know, beyond our borders, because the bombs we drop, whether we're using drones or whether we're using pilots, scar entire nations. And really, they do. We leave trauma for generations, you know, and the kids who come back, they're living with parents who are scarred and reliving the trauma, reliving the PTSD, you know, and they learn bad reactions to trauma and stress from their parents. It's time we need to break the cycle. And to that event, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this today. Because it's time people understand what kind of trauma our politicians are putting us through. What they expect of you and me, and the 100,000 other service members that rotate through the different sandboxes year after year. You know, we're teaching them ways that are unhealthy, bringing them back unhealthy, and we're not taking the time to heal, either as a nation or as service members or veterans.
Absolutely, and I like to draw this comparison that if your house is on fire, and let's be honest, let's be raw right now. Our house is on fire. Our national house is on fire. If your personal house is on fire, would you start today by reinforcing it with fireproof technology and sprinklers and putting a fire hydrant outside and having hoses and fire extinguishers? But did you do that today while your house is on fire? The first thing you would do is put out the damn fire. Put out the fire, and that's what we need to do now. We need to put out the fire. I'm not going to use his name, but I've become really good friends with a man that I respect and admire. And I should have asked him before I came here today if I could use his name, but I'm going to tell his story. He's a National Guard soldier. He was the former captain of a major Division I football team. In his senior year of college, he decided he wanted to be a Green Beret. He didn't want to go into the NFL. He could have gone to the NFL, but he wanted to be a Green Beret. So he joined the ROTC program, and they rushed him through 4 years of ROTC because he's the poster boy. All-American football player, wants to go fight in the war. Does it sound like a story we've heard before with Pat Tillman?
Pat Tillman, PR,
He's
recruiter
going to be a part of
poster.
the PR machine. And so they push him through, and he becomes a Green Beret. He becomes an officer in the most elite special forces the United States military has to offer. And they put him in the 19th group, which is a National Guard Special Forces group. Let that sink in for a minute. Citizen soldier has a job as a citizen, but he's also a Green Beret, and they would take him and his unit, and they would supplement other national or other special forces units to go fight all over the world: Africa, the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. He did them all. And while he was leading a National Guard, a Special Forces mission in Afghanistan just 2 years ago, he and 31 of his teammates were blown up, and his best friend was killed. And he himself was injured, and along with all 31 of the people on his team were injured in a vehicle-borne IED. And they flew them all back to Germany. They treated the ones that could be treated in country, and then flew them to Germany for treatment. That's the natural progression out of country. You go from the Middle East to Germany and then back to stateside. 30 of the 31 were in Germany together. The one that had died, they flew home. On the team were 11, I believe, National Guard Special Forces, and the rest were active duty. They got to Fort Lewis, Washington as a unit, all 30 of them being treated together. And as soon as they landed on American soil, generals swooped in and took the active duty soldiers and flew them to Walter Reed for first class, first world, the best treatment available. Brain injuries, missing limbs, they do it all. The National Guard soldiers, who were augmenting the unit, who were just as trained, just as badass as the next guy, they sent them home to be treated at their hometown clinics and their hometown hospitals. And same mission, same training, same patriotism, if you will, same, but when they got home, they separated them because they were less than. And so he is now advocating from the inside to change the machine. When they did his exit interview, when he left the military because of his injuries, they asked him, "What are you going to do now?" And am I free to speak? He leaned across the table to the general and the colonel that were interviewing him, and they said, "What are you going to do now?" And he leaned in. He's a big, very big, burly man. And he pointed at the general and he goes, "I'm going to bring the motherfucker down from the inside. I'm taking you on. I'm going to destroy the way that you are treating Americans and citizen soldiers when they come home from war." And now he's advocating for veterans benefits. And if you don't think that's a powerful voice, a guy that walks into a room that's 6'2" with a big barrel chest and a hairy beard, limping because of his injuries, you don't think that's a powerful voice? That's the guy that's going to change. That's the guy that's going to force this to change. And he's doing just that. He tells the story of the National Guard becoming the easy button for politicians. There's clearly not enough soldiers in the military, Joe, you'd agree with this,
right,
to maintain the pace of the mission that's going on around the world right now. And so their politicians are taking National Guardsmen and forcing them to leave their jobs, leave their families, leave their homes, and instead of taking care of floods and emergencies and things on our home front, which is the National Guard's mission, they're going to fight in these forever wars. And that's part of what we're doing now from the inside at the local level. Can I tell this story real quick?
Absolutely,
Okay.
please do.
At the local level now, we're about to announce legislation that we're writing and proposing in 22 states right now that have signed on. Starting here in Idaho, West Virginia, and Wyoming. That's the 3 first chapters. Where we're going to make it law that for the National Guard to be deployed to fight in a war overseas, there better be a proper declaration of war from Congress, or you can kiss our ass, we're not going. Woo-woo! And we're going to have the governor's hands tied, where they cannot release National Guard's troops. So the states are going to tell the federal government we're changing policy. The states are going to affect the change, because it's not going to happen in the swamp. It's going to happen in Idaho. It's going to happen in Ohio. It's going to happen in Michigan. It's going to happen in West Virginia. And we're going to
happen in Texas.
Texas is one of the states. Texas is one of the states that's on board. In fact, you're going to love this. Texas, the state GOP party, the grand old party of the state of Texas, has officially changed their party platform to include language from the legislation that the National Guard will not deploy without a proper declaration of war from Congress. Texas was the first state, the grand old party from the state of Texas. So that's what we're doing at the local level. And you, I think, probably more than anybody else that I know, believe that all politics are local. Everything.
Yes.
War overseas, it's a local issue. Because if you make it a national issue, nobody cares.
Yeah. So there were two other people that I wanted to have here today. One of them was Tekle Gabriel. He's actually at drill this weekend. Petroleum specialist for the Army Reserves.
92 thoughts.
And the other was Shadi Ismail. Hey Shadi, if you're watching. But Tekle is from Ethiopia and Shadi is from Syria. And we'll actually get a chance to do pretty much the same format like we have right now. Me and Shadi will be talking tomorrow evening about our relative experiences with the culture, the one he grew up in, and his experiences, and how that made his role as a community activist and community leader here in Boise. You know, how that helped build him up and prepare him for what he does here. But it's one of those things. We have a huge refugee community here. A lot of people from Iraq, a lot of people from Afghanistan. International Rescue Committee actually did a brief recently as far as the number of Yazidis and Kurds that have sought asylum here in the United States. Come over here with experiences bringing literally the best of their culture with them. You know, where we go over and we shore up the worst, you know, they come over here bringing their best. And we do owe them a significant for what they contribute to our diversity and our education, our learning.
Absolutely. We have the stories, this shows you how inspired I think our movement, our efforts are. I think that, I don't think anything happens for an accident. Everything that's happened from the last 10 months, I think is touched by some creator, some divine person. The day we launched Bring Our Troops Home, I had to get on an airplane and fly out, and I called for an Uber. That's how old I sound. I pushed the button on the phone application for an Uber to show up, and the guy shows up, and on my app it says that he speaks Pashtun, which is an Afghan tribal language.
Yes.
And I'm looking at his picture, and I'm like, God, that guy looks, there's no way I know this guy. I get in the Uber, and he was my interpreter in Afghanistan.
Wow.
He had fled Afghanistan because of his helping, after 10 years of interpreting, the United States stood up and said, we will protect you, come to America. And he happened to land in Boise, Idaho, and he's an Uber driver. He lived right across the street here on Vista. And it was like a reunion. We sat there and laughed and cried, and we were excited to see each other. And I asked him, what is it like now? After I left, what's it like? He said that he begged the United States Embassy to bring him to America because people were threatening to kill his family and children every single day because he was acting as an interpreter. He wasn't fighting the war. He was trying to open up dialogue.
Yeah.
And I asked him, what is it going to take? What is it going to take for us to end this thing? And he said, get out, go home. He goes, let my generation stand up and fight for Afghanistan principles. He goes, Afghanistan's a country, but we're not nationalists. We don't identify as Afghan.
No.
They identify as the tribe that they belong to. Pashtun is the largest majority. He goes, but you've got to get out, and the money you're paying the warlords, give it to the next generation of college students, artists, business people. If you want to spend money there, spend it the right way. Quit dropping bombs and just leave. And I thought that was so powerful that he would say that.
So that's going to bring me around to my final tour in Afghanistan in 2011. We were doing intelligence collection, yeah. It was a surge. It was down south. We had a warlord there that we were providing intelligence for along the border. He was border policeman. You know, when we first showed up, he was a colonel. Before we left, he was a general. Our intelligence is what made him a general. You know what we were doing? We were telling him where all of the rival tribes were smuggling all their drugs through. these were supposed to be joint operations, so we could control what happened to the rival smugglers. Problem is, somebody in our chain of command decided to give him the information early. So we'd show up to dead rival tribesmen and missing drugs. The way we empowered that particular warlord during 2011 and 2012, he was effectively in control of the origin and smuggling of roughly 70% of the world's opium trade.
And his brother, please tell me this is Karzai's family. Because Karzai's brother, same thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it was one of those things. He owed homage to Karzai's brother. But I was there in 2011. 2012 was when Karzai's brother was actually killed in Kandahar. This particular warlord that we were facilitating the interdictions for actually replaced Karzai's brother in Kandahar. He's dead now, which is the nature of the politics in that particular region. You don't be powerful for very long without other people wanting what you have. But another one of the tragedies of that was their policies for blood debt. He actually used the money he made from stealing the drugs to pay the balance of the blood debt, and he still came out ahead. And it's only because we're there facilitating. So, when we are done with the forever war, what's your next plan?
It's a great question. I haven't thought that far ahead, even though I feel like we're making progress. We're moving the needle. I don't see it ending anytime soon without a major shift and more activism. I guess my next plan after that would be to take a break and rest. I think you know how many hours I spend on this because you probably do the same with what you're doing.
An amazing amount of time.
It's exhausting. So I don't know. I'll find some issue that I'm passionate about, and that could be anything ranging from going back and coaching high school football again. Because in 2 weeks I'm retiring from high school football because I don't have the time for it right now. But I don't know. But in the meantime, it's these. I only brought this. I don't know if anybody can even see that. I'm gonna hold it for the camera. It's a map of the world. And on it shows the 80 nations where the United States is actively fighting.
Where people are shooting at us or we're shooting at people.
Correct. And we're supplying arms to both sides or one side, or we're funding one side or both sides. I wouldn't even say we're refereeing. We're not playing the world's policeman. We're playing God. We're playing a literal game of Risk. And so my goal is to shrink this map down. That's my focus right now, and that's how I'm healing my internal guilt. My issues is my healing is being done by hopefully not setting another generation to go fight. So my oldest son, stepson, is a senior this year in high school, and we had senior night at his game last night, and he announced to the entire stadium. I wasn't aware of this, that after graduation he's planning on joining the Marine Corps, and my heart swelled.
Did he jump for joy?
It did.
Swell in the pride
It did.
of your alma mater, and then the realization.
The realization set in that my own son is going to fight in the war that I fought in, and it reinvigorated my fight again. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I actually have 2 of my children currently serving in uniform. One's in Korea right now with the U.S. Air Force, and the other one's in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Aircraft mechanic, fixing helicopters.
It's important that we always keep them in our thoughts and our prayers.
Yeah. And it's important that we fight to make sure that what they enlisted for, what they end up fighting for, is a just cause. You know, not a false flag, not somebody's pocketbook, but a just cause based on the principles we grew up with in America. Not the ones that are being practiced in the swamp, but the ones that build our communities. So, covered about 45 minutes here for two people. You got any closing statements, Dan?
I don't, but if anybody has any questions, I'm an open book. You can find me here. I'll be here for a little bit, or you can find us at www.bringourtroopshome.us, or you can link to me through Greenpeace or Green Party of Idaho.
Yeah, Green Party of Idaho.
Thanks for the platform, Joe. You are doing awesome things here. Idaho is a unique and frustrating political environment.
Isn't that the truth?
So keep up the good work. Keep up a good fight.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it.
So you flew in from Texas for the green? You flew in from Texas? Well, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. What part of Texas?
Dallas.
Dallas, gotcha. And you're from Massachusetts, from the Northeast. Right.
I recorded
So
it,
Boston, Texas.
so it's on here. I can load it up on the site.
Okay.
Well, it actually broadcasts through, but for some reason this is being slow with the internet process. So I was watching it on my phone and I could actually see the progressions a little slow, a little tilted.
Yeah, I could see it
But-
was behind, but every so often it would come up with a
Ohio,
Yeah.
California, Massachusetts, Texas.
Got it recorded.
This guy, you've been here for a minute.